Shalom. Dad,
What up, man?
I'm doing my homework um for substance abuse counseling course I'm taking.
How are you liking that?
Uh I mean, I decided I decided I need to go get my master's of social work. So, I'm finishing this course and then next semester I'm going to take just a practical. There's a course where you actually practice counseling, and
Yep.
I'm gonna go ahead and take that course, but that's mostly because I want to see what it's like. I don't think I'm gonna actually finish this certificate program.
Okay. Any kind of new and interesting stuff you picked up on while in school?
Um, well, I don't know if it's new to you, but it was new to me.
That's what I want.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so what was new to me was I didn't realize how much when there's a real actual trauma to your psyche, you end up kind of getting stuck at the age you were at until you mature out of it. And so a lot of people with substance abuse problems, they actually end up stuck at the age they were when they started abusing. And a
Hmm.
lot of people, they start, drinking or doing drugs at really young ages, like 12 or 14, sometimes even less. And um, they tend to actually often just stay at that age until they've been able to deal with their substance abuse problem.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
that's
really.
interesting. I find that really interesting. I wonder where they get that information because I've heard that forever, and in
Mhm,
some ways, I can even sense that in myself.
mhm.
I'm just wondering how they measure that. You know.
So the professor for this class I'm taking, he's 85 years old. And it's really funny because he knows what he's doing really, really well, but he doesn't understand it propositionally. So, like, he knows how to be a really good counselor. That's obvious when he does like role playing stuff. And he does a lot of that in our class. And like, he ends up psychoanalyzing the people in our class in front of us. And then people ask him about it, and he doesn't really seem to understand himself what he's doing, which is funny.
Yeah.
Because he'll give like these answers to um he'll give these answers to people's questions, and I would be sitting there going, yeah, no, that's not why you did what you did. And one of the things that he often does is he asks people, and he did it to me. He asked, um, like, what age are you acting like, right?
Right.
And invariably, the person will give an age which they view is bad. Like, so when he did it to me, I said 5, and he followed up with, "What happened at age 5?" And it was like, "Oh my god, how did he know?" Right? Because age 5 is like when some really, really bad stuff happened to me. And similarly, like other people will say 15 or 16 or even like 20 or even 30, and it'll be it'll be an age at which they had some sort of experience where they felt like they weren't living up to it. Um and so you'll see people who hang around with people who are much younger than them, or they they won't be able to relate to people who are at the same level of maturity as they are,
Yeah.
because they just never, they're still 20. They never really matured to be 30 or 40 or whatever age they are.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
makes that substance abuse would do that, because like once you're drowning your mind in a substance, you're not actually progressing in intellectual maturity. Although unfortunately, um you know drugs and alcohol will fry your brain. So a lot of people with substance abuse problems will be like, they will have mental impairments like 50 or 60-year-olds at much younger ages, but they'll still be very immature.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of that's very interesting.
Does it sound
So
true to you?
to a degree, it does. That's why I wonder when they say it, because I wonder how they measure it or if it's a theory. Because, um, like, so I started drinking when I was 12. And in many ways, I do have the characteristics of a 12-year-old. Um,
But you've also been sober for 9 years.
yeah. So, yeah. But I still have a lot of those 12-year-old tendencies. But it's like, where do we begin the stunting process? Is it when I picked up a drink? Or was it when I experienced some of the first traumas? Because that's even more difficult to go into. Like, that would be maybe 5, 6 years
Hmm.
old, maybe even younger, um, and then at different times, uh, and then in the form of different traumas. And,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of, like, so the kind of, because here's the thing, like, there are people who, and I hope I don't lose you in this call. I might robot for a little bit, but there are people who have lived really good lives with really great parents, and they had stable upbringings, and they still found their way into alcoholism or other drug addictions, and there wasn't trauma attached to it. So the trauma thing, I think there's some validity to it, but I don't think it's a solid uh, uh, kind of fix all answer, or you know uh, it's not. I don't think it's 100% solid across the board. I've seen many alcoholics who didn't have traumas, you know,
Yeah.
and then
So I mean,
it's a matter
what
of deciding what is trauma.
Well, I mean, what you're pointing to is a very real problem of any extremely complex system, right? And you see
Right.
that a little bit like when you're dealing with, for example, plumbing or like HVAC systems, and there'll be many different things that can cause either a fluid, fluid dynamics and air dynamics two are very, very complex, as opposed to, dealing with something that's solid, because fluids and gases, you know they can be influenced by a lot of different things, and it's not like, you know when you're dealing with wood, let's say, or stone, right? In order to break something apart, or to mold it, you apply pressure at a certain place, and yeah, it's possible, like, there'll be different types of cracks or breaking or whatever, right? But it's a
Yeah.
lot more measured, and you can tell where the force is coming from that's causing things to move in the ways they are. And so things that are mental, right? Things that cause us mental trauma are much more complex and varied, and they can have the same effects through different causes, and how they affect different people, because, like, a human psyche is just so complex. It's far, far more complex, than just a few things. And that's why, so for example, Freud, he had this idea of, like, the mind being broken up into the id, the ego, and the superego, right? And the interactions between them. And
Yeah.
that's kind of been, I wouldn't say debunked, but there are other theories. And that's why John Vervaeke, for example, like, he studies a very specific thing in human cognition, but, like, he has it split up into four types of knowledges that has four types of memories. And frankly, I think any of those, we try to make models for things that are incredibly complex so that we can understand some of the dynamics, but
Right.
ultimately we're just, like, our minds are so complex that we just have some vague ideas of how to affect them, and it's even more complex than, like, fluid dynamics or aeronautics or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I find so fascinating about the character of Bill Wilson. And again, I'm probably going to lose you because I'll start roboting. But like, this is a guy who was an atheist, and kind of somewhat of an atheist, more agnostic maybe. Kind of like just a cultural Christian, I suppose. Um, didn't go to church. His grandfather didn't believe in church, and he did have some traumas. Um, and then, but what they found was like the spirituality and pragmatics were like going to be the answer to this like riddle that had never been solved before, right? And it still isn't 100% solved, but it's like about as close as it gets to a real answer, right? It's like really bizarre. Like AA is such a bizarre phenomenon. It really is, and like the fact that they found that it would actually be a spiritual solution, one that would
Mhm.
put the tools in the tools in the hand of the alcoholic, not to save himself, but to serve others. And it's really bizarre. Um,
Well, I wouldn't say it's.
and
I mean, I wouldn't say it's bizarre, but it is something that works. And so this is the difference between. A lot of people think something that's empirical is rational, and there's a real difference between what's rational and what's empirical. So you know something through empiricism because you try it out and you see it works. And it doesn't matter if you understand why it works or how it works. And
right,
then you try to reason why or how it works, right? So, for example, this article came out a few months ago that a lot of people were talking about, which showed that we don't know why antidepressants work, and we don't. Like, antidepressants, and so a lot of people started talking about antidepressants don't work. And it's like, no, 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 that's not what it said. What it said is we don't know why it works. We can't figure out how it
right. In
works.
the same way that we
And
don't know why, right? We don't know why or how aspirin works either.
okay, yeah, I didn't know that, but yeah, there's plenty of things. Same thing, when they first found out penicillin, right? They didn't know why penicillin worked. It just did, and that was enough, right? And I think a lot of AA, right? The things that are done in AA, well, they work, which is good enough, you know? And they might not work for everybody, and there are, I know at least a few people I've talked to were like, yeah, AA doesn't work for me, or there are other ways. And it's like, okay, so if this doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It's worked for enough people. Like, I've spoken to a lot of people. You're not the only one, who it has worked for, right? And it's
Right,
like, we don't have to understand why something works for it to actually work.
right. Yeah, I think about like the word mental or like when we talk about mental health, and I look at like some of the etymologies of there, and they were originally talking about something like spirituality or the spirit. And
Hmm.
so I think it's interesting that a lot of I think what mental health is like maybe in a more mystical language is more like spiritual health or spiritual sickness. And so that's why I think it's interesting that AA does work, and it can work for people
You're
who
cutting it in and
are
out.
like it's very very interesting. Yeah, yeah. I'll be back online in a second.
Okay. Mark says people miss that science works from observation. The thing has to happen first, then you come up with the hypothesis of why, which is wrong. So you keep going with more. Um, Look, I think there is a thing of, like, trying to understand why something and how something works, and then um, moving forward from there. And theories are nice and good. And in fact, in order for a hypothesis to become a theory, it means it worked pretty well for at least some time. But then, yeah, the question becomes, how exactly does it work? And oftentimes we don't know exactly how it works.
Right, right. I mean, like, am I back on?
Yeah.
Is it working? Okay, so like the idea that Dr. Silkworth had around the idea of the allergy, right? Which he's talking about the alcoholic. There's a theory of analogy where the an allergy where when an alcoholic has contact with alcohol, he has an abnormal physical reaction to alcohol, and the manifestation of that allergy is a craving, right? And that was a theory that he was working on out of observation. And that was built into kind of the presuppositions that AA would use and still use today. And it's very, it's like not a fact, but it's like something about that fact gets us moving, or something about this idea gets us moving into the right direction. And that's one of the things I love about AA is it's like it's completely irrational. Like it's irrational, um, but it's like let's use some pragmatic tools. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's work on this. We can start to see things, and like in a lot of ways, it embraces the irrational, and I love that about it. And because it helps us to, in a way, it's like it kind of uses. I don't want to say bullshit, but in a sense, like it, like we're okay with the fact that we know there's bullshit in some of this somehow. We don't know what the bullshit is exactly, but we don't really need to figure out what that is exactly. But it has us moving in the right direction and seeking, right? Because like again, if it's mental and physical, well, mental is really spiritual, and so there must be a spiritual solution. And so it seems like things that solve spiritual problems. Like the most consistent things probably across all the traditions is like seek something like a god, whatever that means to you, and serve others. And like voila, there you have it. And then they basically made a wholesale replication of spiritual awakenings, which is, I mean, a miracle. And, I mean, it's absolutely insane, but it works.
Yes.
You know, and it doesn't work, as you said, it won't work for everybody. Now here's the funny thing. I just got a call on Friday from a friend that I met on Discord who was on Bridges of Meaning for a while and then ended up getting kicked off for whatever reason. And he called me and we were talking and it was great. He's like, yeah, I got 4 months sobriety. I got a sponsor. I'm doing my steps and like lost a bunch of weight. And I'm like, oh shit, man. Like as often as I see it working, it still blows my mind every time because it's one of those things where you can't predict who it will work for or who it won't work for. I believe it could work for everybody. It's a matter of how are you willing to fit yourself to it. That's the thing. Anyways,
True.
so anyways, I
And
think it's great that you're doing that class.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what the master's degree. Honestly, part of what I don't like is the fact that you can't just like take tests to see what you don't know and then teach you that part. I wish they would do stuff like that and they don't.
Can you give me an example of something like that?
Well, I mean, for example, like so I'm this is one of the textbooks, chemical dependency essentials of chemical dependency counseling, and like 90% of the book is stuff I already know. Like it's telling you things like I don't know, what the DSM is, diagnostic and statistical manual, or the different types of psychology, and different models of psychotherapy, which you know I know a lot of this stuff from years and years of having had
Right.
psychotherapy, having studied like not just for my own thing, but also like I've taken some psychology courses and stuff, and like none of that is so like 90% of the course. And then, for example, like this one course I'm taking is the law and ethics courses, and it's like I went to law school. I could teach this course better than my teacher could. And in fact, like I'm just sitting there not bothering to correct the stuff he says because like why do I want to get into an argument with somebody who hasn't been to law school about how he's misunderstanding law, you know?
So the testing you want is it's actually going to be probably more like in the field work
Yeah, see,
because that's where
like
a
if
lot of this stuff applies.
yeah, I this is why I'm taking the fieldwork class next semester, even though like I don't care about the credits. I just want to like actually go out in the field and if it was and this is part of the thing what I've noticed is you can take as many of these counseling courses as you like. Like some people are never going to be able to become therapists because there it takes a certain way of approaching other people and a certain emotional maturity and like some of the people in my classes it's like yeah you're never going to be a therapist I don't care how many of these classes you take
Right.
and they
Yeah, I
they
mean, I have
certainly
like
yeah,
I've
go ahead.
I've listened. Yeah, go.
Well and they're
No, go
never
ahead.
going to somebody who takes the class they're never going to say and these people graduate with like they take 5 years to get a PhD in psychology and um maybe they'll do some counseling but they often won't and I've spoken to them and it's like yeah it's like I'm never going to be a counselor it's just not like I know the stuff but you know it's I guess it's kind of like going to a class to become an artist and some people are just really good at drawing without the classes and they may in fact get better with the classes and some but some people can take all the classes they want and get all the tests right and but they're never going to become a great artist you know
Oh yeah, right, right, right. No, I've seen that. So I can fall into some of that stuff, right? Like I know plenty of recovered alcoholics who like don't have the technical know-how of the steps, and they just are marvelous. Like that's the kind of guy you want on your team, you know. And then I know other people who know the basic literature of Alcoholics Anonymous inside and out, and can't or won't do the work and or stay sober. It's like, yeah, I mean, you could quote the book all day long and know the perfect workings of how it's supposed to work, and all that stuff, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't do
mm-hmm.
anything with it, you know. And that's like so, you get alcoholics like myself who like information and are satisfied by information, and then throw ego on top of that. It's like, yeah, it can be deadly for somebody like
Yeah
me. um, but it's like, uh, yeah, I mean, I've listened to I don't know 500 hours of Jordan Peterson.
hmm
I know his maps of meaning. I know his you know the personality courses. Like that doesn't make me a psychologist. You know, in fact, I'm not sure how much of that I've ever even used in my sponsorship work, right? Because it's like that's now a totally different, right?
mm.
You know.
Have you considered like actually taking some courses like this?
I think every almost every alcoholic I've ever met
Mm,
um, has considered doing what you're doing.
mm,
Almost everyone I've ever met, because it's one of these things. It's like, oh, I learned something here, and I want to be helpful to people. And so that's why you have a field that's saturated with people um, who are probably from these fellowships. Um, and also, with that being said, there's a very high burnout rate then for those alcoholics. Now they might stay in the field and work as you know, substance abuse counselors, but eventually they'll stop actually working the program. Many of them drinking and using it because it's not 12 steps. Like it's not like in AA we do it for fun and for free. We don't get paid for it. And then so like
Mm,
there's a guy I sponsor. He's in your field, in that field. He's been on
mm,
that field since I started working with him. When he asked me to sponsor him, 5 years ago now, he's like, "Will you sponsor me?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah." And I was like, so kind of new at the thing. He, I started working with him, and he was like, I was like, "So yeah, what's your sobriety date?" And he says like, "I have 90 days." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm 90 days sober." And and what happened was he was so afraid of like the legalities of working with alcoholics, um, just in the fellowship. Like he couldn't, he would rarely go to meetings, and when he was at the meetings, he would participate, and he would never consider sponsoring somebody because he um, thought it could violate some HIPAA law or some shit like this, and so he wasn't actually engaged in a solution to alcoholism. Meanwhile, he's getting paid to try to manage drunks and alcoholics, and be an authority figure in in
mm.
the uh, in the field. And he suffered for many years. He did that for like 10 years, and then we had to sort. Once we started working together, we had to sort out that these are two different things. And I only want to work with people who are willing to sponsor. So if you're not willing to do that, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Like you're gonna have to figure out what's the right course of action here because it's
Mm.
detrimental, and you have to be able to sort them out. You have to be accountable to each other, all that stuff. And and AA isn't counseling. AA is not therapy. It's one alcoholic helping another. And but he's been sober now for I don't know 5 years or something like that. And he's been staying sober through. He stayed sober through a divorce and
Mm.
and all sorts of stuff. Like he doesn't have custody of his child, and he's had, you know, it's been difficult for him, but he's been able to stay sober through it and active in AA, as well as continue to work in the field.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's a miracle, you know. Um,
Yeah, one of the things I was actually this chapter this is the final chapter of that textbook I showed you was talking about how there's a big divide in the field between people are who have experience with substance abuse, and oftentimes they haven't taken a lot of like the same classes and stuff, and they got into it because they were working, on their own substance abuse, and then they started working in the field. And then there are people who, like me, wanted to work in the field, and we don't have our own experience with substance abuse, and we take a lot of courses, and so we come from a very different way of looking at things. And like they were trying not to say it too badly, but like the whole chapter was about how people get into fights and turn into cliques and don't work well with each other in organizations. And it's like, wow, that's sad.
yeah. Well, a lot of that has to do with and you'll see this too. I think AAs that don't work in the field,
Mm.
um, many of them are suspicious of the field because
Mm.
part of it is they're two totally different languages. You know, like when Alcoholics Anonymous talks about a craving, it's very different than what the field will call a craving, right? And
Yeah.
when Alcoholics Anonymous refers to insanity, it's very different than what the field refers to. And so you
Mm.
have two competing languages trying to work on the same problem. Well, that probably isn't true either. I mean, they're actually working on two totally different problems. So, um, and one field is, in my opinion, probably more aimed at self-help and
Mm.
how can I work on me so that I can get out of this hole. And the other is aimed at how can I stop doing that so that I can be of service to other people. Because inherently, my problem is a problem of self-centeredness. So you can't take a self-centered individual and have him work on himself and be successful. That's the whole
Mm.
problem. And so you got two completely different worlds colliding. And it's only those that I think that do it very well are
Mm.
actually in both worlds, and that can actually translate between the two worlds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said something really important, which my classes have been talking about, which is a lot of times people with substance abuse problems are very, very centered on themselves. And like my professor, he said something like, if you look at um, narcissistic personality disorder, you're you're basically gonna say every single addict is has it,
Yes.
and to 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 some extent, apparently it just maybe it's being caused by the addiction, or maybe it was the reason they got addicted in the first place. But it's just something that goes so hand in hand with and like we've been so this other textbook I have is co-occurring substance abuse and mental disorders, because like a lot of people have both a substance abuse problem and a different mental disorder. And apparently, for a very long time, there was a problem. Just the people who, so some people worked in substance abuse and some people worked in mental health, and they, the people in mental health would be like, I'm not going to treat you until you get um, uh, substance abuse help, and you're sober. And the people in substance abuse were like, well, I can't help you with your mental health disorder, so you have to go get that treated before. And like people wouldn't be able to even get help because like people would be basically giving them the runaround. And that's one of the things that like they've started addressing is, no, you can't just tell somebody they have to be sober in or stable or both. It's like in order to become sober, you may need help becoming stable, and in order to become stable, you may need help becoming sober.
Yep.
So,
Right.
yeah,
And I think,
um,
yeah. So like, go ahead.
yeah, but
AA's position on this. Now you have in the past you have had people who have um, been very poor examples of AA members, and they would say things like, um, "If you're taking medication, you're not sober," right? And this is
Right.
I've never heard anybody actually say that, but I know that that's kind of something that happened in the past, and like the way I understand it, I mean, it's right in the literature. It says if you need help with outside issues, go get it and get it now, right? It's like, and so AA as a whole doesn't have an opinion on it. It's like, I mean, it says something like God made doctors, use them, like if you broke your leg or something, you wouldn't just like, say, I don't know. It gets really weird. So we are more like, hey, if you want our help, we're here to help, right? And
Mm,
if you want to take some steps and do some and recover in that way, I'm here to help. If you don't want to do that, I absolutely understand. In fact, I don't care what you do. Like, I really don't. If you want to, do coke and hookers, I don't care. It's not my business, right? My
mm,
business is, do you want to recover from alcoholism? If so, we could do this work here. I don't have rules or demands. I just tell you, this is what I would do. If you don't want to do that, then we're not doing it. And it doesn't mean I have to help out either, right? So
mm,
it's like it gets so willy nilly, and but I do think it's probably the best model because like I think the traditions in AA have the most wisdom out of probably almost any organization I've ever seen. Um, and unless someone understands them, it's like, well, that how the hell is that supposed to work? It's like, well, it's really weird, but it does. Um,
mm.
uh, so that's pretty cool. I would love to talk more about this, and maybe we'll talk more about this in the future. I pulled up to the detox place now, so
It was nice meeting
nice meeting me.
you. That's what I say to people, and always, and like it takes them a while recognize like it's not the first time we've met, and sometimes it's like, how long did it take you to notice? I always say goodbye by saying it was nice meeting you.
I don't think you've ever said that to me.
I don't know if I do it always online, but in real life, anytime I'm saying goodbye to people, like I basically always say, "It's nice meeting you." It's one of my
Well, that
love.
would that would make sense because we've met basically once. So,
This is true. Yes.
but next time I'll say it back to you. Anyways, I'll talk with you later, my friend. It was nice meeting you.
Be well. Uh, well, partially because I do my work on uh Sundays as well. I have trouble keeping 5-day work weeks. So I tend to do 3 and 2 and not and like so I either work Saturday or Sunday, um, and then like take Wednesday off. Um, Also, like on Sundays, it's convenient to come to work. Mm. Hey,
Long time no see, buddy. How you doing?
it has been a long time. How are you? Can you hear me?
Give me a second. I'm getting some feedback.
Make sure you turn off your YouTube.
And it was fixed.
Yes. So when it is a very common thing to click on the StreamYard and then come on and then notice that your YouTube on the background is still going but not notice, and that's so
Yeah.
very common thing to happen on StreamYard. I'm guessing this is your first time on StreamYard.
Yeah, I don't think I've used this platform before. Looks pretty seamless.
Yeah, I really like it. I really like it. I've become kind of an evangelist, and Paul Vanderclay joked that I must be working for them. It's a very good platform. I noticed the Muslim Dawah scene is using it a lot. I don't know how much you know about Muslim Dawah.
I don't know anything about that.
It's basically their form of evangelism. It literally means to invite.
Okay. I mean, what other platforms are available other than StreamYard, though, to do this?
Well, some people will use. Some people will try to use Zoom, although with that, it's not. You can't really do it live. A lot of people were using Discord, but that's difficult to make work. You can stream from Discord to YouTube, but you have to use your own connection to download and then upload. There are some other services, but I really like StreamYard. It works. It's really easy, and it's actually pretty powerful. Like, you can actually use OBS as a virtual camera and stream, and so ultimately use OBS I did some fiddling with the sound with Voicemeeter, so it's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh,
You have
Voicemeeter Banana.
I'm actually using Voicemeeter Potato. Maybe I should have used Banana because I'm having trouble with it.
I couldn't get Banana to work myself. I was dying to get it to work just to reroute my DAW and various audio inputs.
Yeah, I've been having trouble with it, but it works well enough. So there's this guy, what's his name? I think his name is VB Audio. Yeah, he does. Is that the guy? No,
that should be all the Voicemeeter products is VB, I believe.
Yeah, no, there's somebody who has a YouTube channel where he teaches you to use these things. Where did that go? And I joined his Discord server for a while. It was Signal something, and his videos were really, really helpful. But yeah, so he taught me how to use Mini-Host to reduce the background noise on my microphone using Voicemeeter, but yeah, it hasn't been working great, and I'm gonna be moving my office to my house soon, so I haven't been fiddling too much with it because I'm gonna have to redo it. But yeah,
I couldn't help but notice there's a scanner to your left. Is that a museum piece or?
No, I use it a lot. I used to use one of those 3-in-1s, and the fact is, in my work, like, I would end up scanning so many pages, and those 3-in-1, printer scanners, they end up all breaking the scanners after you use them as much as I do. So I ended up buying this, and I have a separate printer, which it's a laser printer, so the ink is much cheaper and it's much faster than an inkjet. And I was only using the inkjet for black and white, and every time I ran out of black ink, they would make me buy new, like, colored things as well, and it was like, you bastages. So this actually ended up being overall cheaper than using the inkjet 3-in-1s everybody uses.
Yeah. Printing has been a fiasco for 20 years, like, as far as the cartridges. And then when they figured out that, like, third-party manufacturers figured out that they could just manufacture cheaper cartridges, and you could buy a cartridge for half the price, and then RFID tags became small enough that you could put them in the cartridges. So then Epson and HP started putting RFID tags in there, so that the Keurig, the classic Keurig flop, where they put RFID tags in all the little foil caps to make sure that you were using the Keurig cups, right? And it's ridiculous. I was assisting a DoD group in a remote location, and they were trying to solve a printer issue, and they weren't able to resolve it. So they had been syringing ink into their cartridge for 7 years because like the cartridges were end of life,
Right.
and they would just have to buy a whole nother $10,000 printer or whatever. So they had just been buying vials of ink and, like, needle and syringe, just getting it in there. And the only reason I learned this was because, like, in trying to solve their problem, I was like, look, it's either we AC 130 another giant printer over here, or we could try like syringing it in. And they were like, yeah, we've been doing that for 7 years. I was like, oh damn, I got nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, so for work, I'm in the insurance business. Once I was printing enough stuff, I noticed just buy yourself a nice Brother laser printer and a separate scanner, and it's just so much better in every way. Even though like the scanner bed, right? It's the same scanner bed. It's probably smaller and worse than the 3-in-1 that I had, but like at least the tray always works. And I end up like this year, before COVID, I was probably scanning at least 100 to 200 pages in 1 month. So yeah, and those 3-in-1s, they're just not made to work like that.
So is your goal to just put a stack of papers in that are collated and just auto scan everything?
Yeah, like, so I get an application and it's like 10 pages, and I need to either fax or upload it. Yes, I still have to use faxes. And so, yeah, scan and then either fax or upload it. And until recently, it was mostly faxing.
Yeah, it's incredible how much stuff still needs to be faxed.
Well, I mean, the problem is email really is not secure. It really, really is not. And even though, as long as people give me permission, I can email PHI. It's a really bad idea, and I end up emailing it to people because a lot of times they don't have a fax machine anymore. But internally, we're not allowed to use, and secure email is just so difficult to use. And a lot of the like the websites that I end up using for these insurance companies, they're just often so bad. And in order to these websites have to be approved by CMS, the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services, which may be the biggest department in the entire federal government. Yes, even larger than the DoD, possibly. I mean, they regulate basically all of healthcare in the United States. And so, like, I remember there were these flyers that one of my, they're called uplines, my general agents had, and they didn't have it in Farsi, and I had the bright idea of translating it to Farsi so that I could get more Persian clients. Well, I get a translation, I submit it. It has to be submitted to CMS for approval. That was 5 years ago. I still haven't heard back. So, and like these websites, I mean, partially I didn't hear back because nobody cares and it was in a different language and whatever. But like all of these websites, any changes they make, it has to go back to CMS for approval. And it's like the most crazy thing in the world. Like all the envelopes. Do I have an envelope with CMS approval on it? Not all the envelopes, but some of my things.
Did you mean to say envelope?
There's a difference between an envelope and an envelope. So, like, this is the approval code for this particular one page, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything you give to a senior citizen regarding Medicare has to have an approval code printed on it.
Neat.
Yeah.
So what's that?
What do you want to talk about?
What do you want to talk about? I mean, you probably don't want to talk about what I want to talk about.
Why? What do you want to talk about?
I don't know, just kind of like what's sort of the state of things in this corner of the internet, as Vanderclay says. Because I've been, I was involved, and then I lurked, and then I involved, and then I lurked, and then some nasty stuff went down, and I found myself
Which nasty
banned.
stuff are you talking about?
Just like some personal stuff with people on Bomb, and then when Joey left, like I tried to somebody was like, please come back, and sent me an invite, and I was like, all right, I'll check it out. Let's see what you guys are up to. And I was banned, and I know it wasn't Joey because he said he didn't or wasn't going to. So I've asked a bunch of people, like, names that everyone sort of knows, right? Nobody can tell me why. And it's not like I'm not yeah, it's just weird, and then obviously there was the stuff that happened with Chad's channel, and I don't really know any of the details. I just see the smoke after the after the happening, and you're like, oh, where did that smoke come from? And people are like, I don't want to talk about it. And then I saw some smoke from Paul that was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then, like, I don't know. Yeah. But I was following Chad's channel, and saw he was like popping on these things. And so I wanted to say hi to some old friends, and saw that people were coming on your Discord. So I reached out to you and checked it out, and here we are.
So, this is probably going to be a long discussion. I am not ducking out in 35 minutes because of the long discussion. I just want to warn you, in 35 minutes, I have to go. So if
it doesn't have to be a long discussion. I mean, we can talk about
the Washington
Commanders.
If we do, I'm perfectly willing to talk about it. It's just I don't want to suddenly have to leave and like somebody to say, oh, it's because something came up. So relational aggression, when the Portal Discord fell apart, I noticed that it was the deliberate workings of some people who, there are social justice warriors who have as part of their mission, this is part of their religion, to try to disrupt what they think of as like counter-revolutionary forces. And it sounds conspiratorial until you see enough of it that you're like, no, these people are actually going around making sure to, like, as part of their religion, to disrupt any community like ours that starts getting too big.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the Portal Discord fell apart, I deliberately kind of moved into Paul Vanderklay's corner because he's used to dealing with all the relational aggression games people play in churches. And people play these same games offline as they do online. Like, online, it's a lot easier to play them, but it's the same game. It's not like this is new. People have been playing these types of games for thousands of years, certainly for hundreds of years, but really for thousands of years. And the only problem is online, it's a lot harder to tell who's playing games and who's serious, and when somebody's playing games. And somebody who's willing to play games online will create multiple accounts or get friends involved, and they'll LARP the stuff, right? And so Paul did a much better job of dealing with these games than, for example, Eric did, or pretty much anybody else does in this little corner. And part of that was Joey. Joey understands these games much better than most people do. And he was being the guard dog in the background that a lot of people didn't realize, including me. I didn't realize how important what he did was. But so what happened was, when Joey left, and frankly, it's not obvious that Joey didn't leave because some people started playing some games, or things got a little bit too complicated. Anyway, Paul insists he doesn't care enough to invest the resources to make things like relational aggression proof, and a community that doesn't deal with relational aggression. And stop me if you want to talk about relational aggression just in general. But
well, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so
give me a one sentence definition for relational aggression as you mean it to be.
One sentence definition. Ooh. Relational aggression is the use of social manipulation techniques to I hate to say social violence, but to destroy or affect someone in particular. So
how? But like, why?
Teenage girls, for example, they participate in a lot of relational aggression through whisper campaigns and through bullying and all kinds of things. Especially females. Females tend to get involved in relational aggression at a much higher rate, and many males just don't even know it's going on, but it's very real.
Yeah, you're talking about like smearing, backstabbing, like,
and yeah,
we already have words for all this behavior, but you're just calling it relational aggression.
It's not just smearing or backstabbing. It can also be clique formation. It can also be there's a lot of different behaviors you can participate in in order to affect a culture of several people and isolate people or magnify voices, that type of thing. Status games.
Mm-hmm.
You can increase people's status, you can decrease people's status, and yeah, I mean, oftentimes one of the most the strongest things you can do is have smear campaigns or whisper campaigns, or but you can also do it by, I mean, it can get very, very complicated and sophisticated. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is things that especially women often have to deal with on a regular basis, and it can be really effective in changing how people behave in groups.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of people who are using relational aggression online, and there's a lot of people, especially men, who can't understand that the things that are going on around them are happening because relational aggression is tactics are being used and changing the dynamics of the groups they're involved in.
Okay. So Pontius Pilate washed his hands and
I
just
wouldn't
said, like, if you guys care about this, somebody will step up, and everything, and people are naturally drawn to the baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, which was your server.
Well, I mean, I I engage in relational aggression far more than most men do.
I know.
And it's I like to think that I do it, with good intentions. But I will talk to people privately. I will build relationships, and part of my involvement with this corner has been an attempt to create a distributed cognition, a clique of people who trust each other, right? That is able to deal with the relational aggression that I see. Look, there's a reason why the woke have been able to capture so much ground. They bully people, and I mean, you might want to, if you're really interested in this stuff, the only real book that talks about it is Counter Wokecraft, which was printed by James Lindsay. And so the postmodern types, the wokerati, are really using a lot of relational aggression in order to capture territory and to affect change. And I got involved in this little corner of the internet largely because I saw what was going on, and I would like to build some sort of fortress that can actually deal with the relational aggression. Mark says relational aggression also happens without the people involved being aware of what they are participating in. Clicks is one example, which is important to know. He's right. There's a game being played that too many, especially males, don't even realize is being played around them. A lot of males just ignore relational aggression, and it often works. This is the thing with relational aggression. It is a shadow campaign, and sometimes the best thing you can do about it is just ignore it. And sometimes you just burst right through it by ignoring it. Because, a whisper campaign of playing status games can often be just destroyed by a little transparency, right? Like somebody goes behind my back and says to you that Jacob's doing so and so, and I I reach out to you individually, and it's obvious that that's not something I'm doing, and that person's a liar. That person just destroyed all of their efforts, their credibility, their own social standing with you, and relational aggression is something you use when you don't actually have a lot of power, and it takes a lot of resources, which is part of why Paul and a lot of people are like, just ignore it, just ignore it. Like those people who are sinking what you call it, resources. And this is what Paul says. He's like, I'm not going to waste those resources on because it doesn't matter. It's not important enough. And if people are wasting their resources on this type of relational aggression and you're not, you're actually better off, right? Unless they are successful. And that's the problem. They are, in fact, being very successful. Mark says, you can use withdrawal as a form of aggression, depleting a group of participants through reputation destruction or just scaring people like Antifa does without explicit bullying. Yeah, it's a game a lot of people don't want to play. It's funny, but like the idea of witchcraft, right? To some extent, it helps people who don't pay enough attention to this stuff to understand what is going on when they think of it as witchcraft, right? Somebody's enchanting someone's casting spells behind you, right? That sometimes is a better way of understanding it, especially for people who are very literal, than even talking about the actual thing, because it's so like abstract. It's difficult to deal with.
All right. So people just going with the flow then.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, I would think that, like, and I'm still trying to kind of walk a mile in your shoes as far as this concept of relational aggression, because you're attributing one, this mimetic phrase, relational aggression, to a lot of different behaviors, and that have a lot of different goals, and rely on a lot of different resources, but like as a top level, I understand what you're saying, as a top level kind of umbrella. Yeah, I mean, it makes me very sad that, like, given the massive amount of things that aren't happening on the Discord, right? It's like, why would anyone spend so much time trying to destroy something that's almost not even there? And then furthermore, like, I don't know, I think it's pretty easy to overcome, like, when it comes to backstabbing or lies or bullying or being accused of bullying, right? Like, one of the most relationally aggressive things, I'm I'm trying to reflect that I understand what you're saying by using the term. Uh, to me, that I've experienced like in the world is when you're in conversation with someone and they accuse you of being defensive, right?
Mhm.
And that usually comes right after they've said something critical about you or attacked you in some way or accused you of something. And they make some kind of truth statement, some kind of factual statement, like you didn't do this good enough, or this isn't, like, for instance, if you just said I didn't care for that, there's nothing for me to defend, right? You just have an opinion. There's Right, but if you make some kind of factual claim, like, you read this poorly, or this photograph is underexposed, or um you really should have done this. uh I find that sometimes they don't have information that I have, and by giving them this information, maybe that might change their mind on the conditions under which they felt they needed to lodge this criticism. And it's not even like a defense of my actions, it's more of an explanation, right? There's excuses and there's explanation. And um even an attempt to explain myself will often, at least in a weaker person, um will result in an accusation of you're being defensive. And it's an incredible thing to say to someone because there is nothing you can say back. There's nothing. What do you retort with? You can either
Uh,
agree with them, you can either agree and say, you're right, I am being defensive,
right.
and they win, or you can argue with them more and prove their point. And so, like, I don't ever accuse people of being defensive, and if I do, I'll apologize 5 seconds later, um, as I've just failed to follow my own rule, because it's a conversation ender, right? It just sucks all the oxygen. There's no, it's almost circular, right? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're being defensive, Jacob. Like, what do you say to that? But again, like, if you have the right foundation, you have enough self-esteem, and you've built up enough goodwill through your deeds and in your words, like, I think it's pretty easy to overcome as long as you're among fellows.
Okay, so you said a lot there, and I think you are understanding what's going on. Um, and you're right. That is a technique. So Mao really Mao really did a good job of perfecting these techniques, as did, in fact, so over the past 100 years, these techniques have been studied and better understood and taken to a whole new level than they used to exist. Okay. And so, um, first of all, what you said at the end is the most true, and at the same time, what makes relational aggression on the internet so dangerous. Because if you have good rapport with other people in real life, right? The type of things we're talking about um, don't really work nearly as well as they do with people who just don't know you that well.
Mm-hmm.
And online, unfortunately, we're dealing with such large groups of people that we don't know that well, that we can't keep track of that well. Honestly, like I barely remember you from like I do kind of remember you, but I barely remember you, you
I'm
know?
very forgettable. It's okay.
No, no, no. Like I how many people have I been in contact? Like the Dunbar number, I believe, is actually, you know, when we say 2 to 300, where it's too small. I think the Dunbar number for humans is really 2 to 3,000, but it's still like there is a number of relationships which our brains can track.
Mm-hmm.
And online, we're dealing with much larger groups, and there's a lot of anonymity. And in real life, you are almost never dealing with a psychopath or somebody who is really good at acting, right? Most people are not very good actors, and very few people are psychopaths. Online, acting, especially through text, becomes a lot easier. A lot easier,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And saying
And
something to somebody's face that you like, you can say something to somebody that you would never say to their face.
that is also part of it. But that just makes the relational aggression and status games more powerful. But also, the reason why psychopaths fail in real life a lot is it's so much more transparent what they're doing, and histories are so much longer, and you know, you get to know someone and you see their interactions with other people, and psychopaths are really bad at long-term relationships,
You don't say.
whereas in a con in a in an online environment where there's a lot of anonymity, and especially I think deliberately a lot of people, like, there is this concept of anons, right, which somehow has gotten into people's brains that it's actually a good thing that we have so much anonymity, which i I am increasingly convinced the anonymity is the problem, which is why I have gone completely, like, completely doxed myself. This is my
Mm-hmm.
last name. You can find my address easy, right? You can make my cell phone ring right now really easy. You have to be an idiot not to be able to find my cell phone number, right? Um, and part of that is because of the amount of relational aggression that's being used. And you're absolutely right that it is oftentimes in real life very easy to diffuse these things with transparency and other people knowing you, right? The problem is in an online environment, it's a lot less it's a lot harder, and people who are truly psychopathic will and or motivated will create multiple personas and will use those multiple personas uh, all at the same time, and they'll think of themselves as like, hey, look how great I am. I'm in fact like manipulating these other people, and they'll get a rush out of it. And part of the problem is that we online, a lot of these larpers are in fact psychopaths, and a lot of these larpers are so ideologically possessed that they believe, like, it's part of their religion. It is their religion that they're making the world a better place by getting involved in these stuff, right? And so somebody who lives a life like that in real life, it would be very obvious that they're a loser, right? They wouldn't have friends. Their family would recognize that they have all kinds of social and emotional problems.
Yeah, just I can't wait. I I love that you use that word, loser.
Loser?
You're
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of
you're a damn loser, right? Like
okay.
that is what I've found it from the portal to the Vervaeke server to Bomb and now to here is that you have some people that are genuinely successful, self-supporting, intelligent, educated, decent, virtuous, have integrity, compassionate, open-minded. They have a balance of conservative and liberal, tendencies, right? And they somehow have to maintain a conversation about the nature of reality with a loser, right? It's someone that, like, if you were in the same room with them, you'd be able to tell that they haven't showered in a week, right? That they aren't self-supporting, they haven't seen daylight in a month, you know, they can't make eye contact, they they can't listen to what someone else says and then think about it and respond within a moment, which is kind of something that you should develop by high school, at least college. If you didn't have the privilege of going to college, you know what I mean? Like, and but somehow it's like these people are engaged in these hours long conversations about some of the deepest, most majestical, most mysterious aspects of life and autonomy in the universe, and they would never interact in real life, and that brings me to my final point, which is none of this is real, man. Like, it's
See, this is where you're wrong. This is where you're wrong. The when we see Clown World manifesting in our real lives, and increasingly you are seeing Clown World manifest in your real life, it's because, yes, generally it's very difficult for these things to manifest into real life. But once it does, once it spills over into real life, then it is absolutely destructive. And so a lot of these people, like, first of all, I have to say, they're like, it's not a binary. Like, we go through cycles of sanity and insanity and capacity and incapacity, and, like, right? So it's not, there are people who, personally, there was a whole year when I couldn't leave my apartment. I really could not, right?
Same goes for me, right? Yeah,
And
you're right. You're
yeah,
completely correct. It is
and
not linear.
and hopefully now I am far more capable than I was during that time. In fact, I know that I'm far more capable than I was during that time. And part of what empowers this, and people have started calling it an egregore, and I'm not sure there's a better term for it, but this movement of wokerati is the best term I can give it, right? Is that it has mobilized an army of such people in a way that it's captured, for example, the New York Times. The New York Times has been captured by people who act like and believe and, like, and it's not just the New York Times. Schools of education have been captured. Increasingly, our schools of medicine, our law schools have been in
No,
many ways
I'm
captured.
right there with you. I'm right there with you. I get what you're saying.
And so these people are actually affecting a lot of things. And to some extent, the internet has provided a backbone for these horrible ideas and ideologies to spread. So, and if we do not create some sort of bulwark, a real bulwark that is, well, I have to say, like, what Elon has done with $44 billion in the past month has been absolutely amazing, awe-inspiring, and much better than I had ever hoped, right? He just walked in and fired thousands of people who had gotten these jobs and were able to capture a really, really important part of, Vijaya Gade, who was the person running Twitter and their policies. She may have been the most powerful single person in the entire United States, possibly in the entire world. And he just bought it and kicked her out and destroyed her life's work, right? And that's beautiful. But and it's very tempting to say, see, this, all of the things she worked towards and everything she put into place, it fell apart. And I don't have a really good answer to that, other than it should have never gotten to that point. And I hope that our society is more resilient and stable than it has been for the past 6 years, certainly, and possibly for the past 20 years. I don't think we've been this close to civil war, certainly in 100 years, possibly in 200 years.
I would agree. It's bad. Luckily, we have TikTok to distract us. I just can't stop scrolling. That's just maybe the next one. Maybe the next one will be good. Just three more. Just three more.
I hope you're being sarcastic. I think you're being sarcastic.
Yes, I'm very sarcastic.
Sarcasm, actually, humor and sarcasm is one of the things that absolutely destroys the capacity of these things to work, which is beautiful and great. At the same time, it can, that's why the Babylon Bee had to be banned. The Babylon Bee is in fact one of the strongest social institutions against this stuff. And frankly, I mean, there's a lot of hope, and I don't have too much to say to the people who are like, you're wasting all these resources in a fight that really was won. I mean, was it, or what pushed Elon to decide to spend $44 billion to take over Twitter? It appears to be the banning of the Babylon Bee and him recognizing that things were getting too crazy. And would he have been aware of things getting as crazy as they are if there weren't people like Jordan Peterson and the Babylon Bee standing up and creating the bulwarks, right? Those places that stand up against relational aggression. My hope is that I am contributing towards the bulwarks against the craziest things. And now I do have to go because it is 5:00. In half an hour, Father Eric is live streaming, and I have a Christmas party to go to. But we can continue this some other time or on my Discord server. I am going to end the broadcast.